financial minister mentioned is that the reason why we don't see local investment is because there is red tape. Now, this adds to the point that I made earlier, that in order to be a reformist government, you need to be willing government.
Our new finance minister, Enoch Godongwana, has a to-do list. And in this list, he mentions that he wants to reform the country's electricity supply. He wants to address the issues surrounding spectrum, and he wants to improve our ports. He also believes that local investors should take the lead in the country's economic recovery plan. Here to talk more about the finance minister's ideas for the country is fellow CRA analyst Bheki Mahlobo. Bheki, it's always good to have you on the channel. I would like to first start off by asking you, what do you think about some of these plans that Godongwana has in store for the country?
Yeah, Gary, there are largely two themes or two aspects that Enoch Godongwana has touched on. The first one is that of reform in the electricity sector. The second one is that of reform in spectrum in the country. Now, these are all good points to make, and reform is a nice word, and it's definitely what the country needs. However, is there actual inclinations for reform by policymakers in the country? And our thoughts on this that we've tracked over the numerous years in the CRA is that we don't currently see that. It is a positive note to state that there needs to be reform in the electricity sector, as there has been a massive decline in the generation capacity of Eskom, just looking at the energy availability factor, which has massive declined over the last 10 years from about 80% to now current levels of about 60%, and breakdowns has increased dramatically from about 6% to now at like 24, 25%. So it's definitely, reforms are definitely needed. Do I see them occurring in the foreseeable months or years ahead from the current administrations? I don't think so. Largely because reform, in order to have proper reforms, we would need to have to strengthen the institutions that the ANC is currently fundamentally weakening. And that is such things such as property rights. We're looking at expropriation of property without compensation, scrapping policies that centralize functions towards the state, such as that of the national health insurance, as well as that of employment equity. So until we scrap all the policies that are detrimental to South African growth levels, I don't see reform happening in any foreseeable future.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CRA.
And everybody thought that Ramaphosa's administration is a reformist government. And we have seen some green shoots in the economy. Private generation of electricity without a permit has now been raised to 100 megawatts. But I believe this is a decision that had to be made more than 10 years ago when load shedding first started in the country. And I think that is one of the many examples that we have that we're sitting with a government that lacks the political will to push through reforms. Now, another point is that South Africa, or rather the South African government, loves to spend. And we are fast approaching a debt crisis. Now, can the new finance minister rein in some of that spending and keep the government from pushing us further into debt trap?
Yeah, Gary, one point to also recall is that in the green shoot that you mentioned in regards to the electricity sector, the increase to 100 megawatts, that was not done willingly by the ANC. In fact, they had to be forced to do so. So in order to be labeled as a reformist government, you need to impose policies, reform policies willingly and not reluctantly. And in terms of the current financial minister, in his ability to actually reel in debts that the country now is seeing, I don't see that as a possible scenario occurring in the foreseeable future, largely because the conditions to do so do not exist. And what conditions are that? Is that of economic growth. In order to achieve economic growth, you need to have proper policies that enabled economic growth in the country and will enable South Africa to emulate what we see in other emerging countries. Now, this is not to say that Enoch Godongwana is not a suitable financial minister. I do see him being able to fight off some of the populist policies from that of the ANC. However, I do not see him strong enough to actually reel in government debt. So unfortunately, the outlook for the country is increased government debt in the foreseeable future.
Yes, Bheki, it's going to take a lot more than one person to turn this ship around. And it is, as you say, South Africa does not have a reformist government because our government isn't willing to reform. It has to be pressured into reforming. I want to pick your brain on one last point that Godongwana mentioned recently, and that is that we should first attract local investors before we look abroad for investment. What do you think about that?
Well, Gerrie, any form of investment is really necessary in the country. When just looking at the gross fixed capital formation, that has massively declined from about 26% in 2007 to 15% now in 2020. Now, one of the points that the current financial minister mentioned is that the reason why we don't see local investment is because there is red tape. Now, this adds to the point that I made earlier, that in order to be a reformist government, you need to be willing government. And in order to be a willing government, you have to admit when you're wrong. And the reason why South Africa has not seen an increase in local investment as well as international investment is because the ANC has fundamentally weakened the institutions that will allow South Africa to increase its investment levels. And in this particular point, I'm talking about expropriation of property without compensation. So that's the fundamental reason why we're not seeing an increase in investment levels in the country. So in order to see a substantial increase in investment, be it local or international, we need to see the complete and utter removement of all these policies that would make investors less likely to invest in the country.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that global investors often look at how local investors view their own country. Well, thank you for joining us. And if you liked this discussion, please give this video a like and click in the link in the description below in order to gain access to our 30-day free trial. Till next time, take care.